Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few kickers I look to start this week. The first guy, Graham Gano of the New York Giants. So over the last few weeks here, he's really been putting up fantasy points as Graham Gano. One of the best kickers he was all season in fantasy football, because he's obviously on an offense that can't move the football all the way and punch in every time down there in the red zone. And a guy getting opportunities from 40 and 50 yards, so those field goals definitely add up. So over the last few weeks here, week 14 versus Philly 2, week 15 at Washington 12, and week 16 at Minnesota 14 fantasy points. So this week here versus Indianapolis, a bend but don't break type of defense. And obviously the woes with this New York Giant offense. I think here in MetLife Stadium could have a good ball game, and the weather is going to be pretty decent as well in the coming week here. Obviously going back up is the temperature. After last week, it obviously was freezing and winds all around the East Coast. The next kick is Daniel Carlson of the Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders back at home, and that's where Carlson does the most damage this season here to fantasy teams. So I know the last couple weeks the numbers have gone down, but this season here, he's had a great year, obviously, with 11 double-digit fantasy point games is Carlson. So the last few weeks, week 14 at the Rams, 12 fantasy points. Week 15 versus New England, 7. Week 16 in Pittsburgh, 5. And now week 17 here versus San Francisco indoors. And we know this Niner team's a bend but don't break defense, where I think this Raider offense is going to have to settle for field goals in this ball game. So this week here, Daniel Carlson gets back on track. I think he could be a top 5 kicker for the week, no doubt about it. And I got him as a start this week. The next guy, Matt Gay of Los Angeles Rams. So Matt Gay, over the last few weeks, he's been back on the fantasy radar and putting up fantasy points. And this week here, good matchup indoors at the Los Angeles Chargers. Pretty much a home game 2.0 here, obviously, for this Los Angeles Ram team. So right now, they're going to have to try to keep points up, even though last week we know they put up 51 points and Matt Gay had a game. So week 14 versus Vegas, 7. Week 15 at Green Bay, 8. Week 16 versus Denver, 19. And week 17 here, it's a good matchup. Like I said, 10th most points to kick is. They got to keep points up with the high-powered offense of the Chargers here. And Matt Gay is definitely a guy that could get the job done after what we've seen from him over the last few weeks. And he's still out there in over 50% of fantasy leagues as well. The next kicker I look to start Younghoe Koo of the Atlanta Falcons. Anytime Younghoe Koo's home, he's one of the best kickers in all fantasy football when that's been the case here. With his home games, double-digit fantasy points in just about all of them except one this season here for Younghoe Koo at home. So the last few games here for him, week 13 versus Pittsburgh, 14. Week 15 in New Orleans, 4. And week 16 at Baltimore, 9. So this week here with a good matchup versus an Arizona defense that really don't stop anyone here and gives up the 8th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. I think Younghoe Koo gets back into double digits at home. This ball game could be a mini shootout with two mediocre to poor defenses. And Younghoe Koo, like we said, we know he's automatic at home. And this week he's a start, and the 5th and final kicker I have as a start this week here is Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Harrison Butker, another better kicker at home this season. I know he's had woes with some short distance kicks and extra points, but this week back home with a great matchup versus the Broncos that give up the 2nd most fantasy points to kickers on the season. We know this offense, one of the best, if not the best offenses in the league. So he'll get his opportunities. He's got the great matchup. And going back to week 14 at Denver, 11. Week 15 at Houston, 4. Week 16 versus Seattle, 7. And this week here, like I said, going back to week 14, I think anywhere from 8 to 11 fantasy points is definitely a possibility. And when you got a guy who plays in a great offense like the Chiefs, he's going to get the chances. That's a few kickers I have as starters here for week 17 of the fantasy football season.